Almost 90,000 people will be diagnosed with lymphoma this year. It's a cancer that the immune system that targets white blood cells. Many patients can be cured with a combo of chemotherapy and immunotherapy, though.
But that doesn't help some people. Marty Salt explains how a new therapy is giving them another chance, possibly their last, of being cured.
I'm pretty partial to the Nicaraguan Romeo.
John Bell is a cigar aficionado, valuing not just the flavor, but the connections a stogie fosters.
I once heard somebody describe cigars as the great cementer of friendship, and I think that's true.
But after 24 years, his part-time hobby of working at the cigar shop was threatened.
I was noticing some swelling in my cervical lymph nodes on the left side, right in here.
John was diagnosed with large B-cell lymphoma, an aggressive cancer of the lymphatic system, and underwent 6 months of chemo.
I was pretty devastated when we got to the end and found out it wasn't completely successful.
Hematologist-oncologist Natalie Grover at UNC Health believed CAR T-cell therapy would be his best option.
It's using a patient's own immune cells to specifically target them to a marker on the lymphoma cells. Their T cells are now specifically targeted to attack their cancer cells.
Side effects were harsh. John's temperature pushed 106. His blood pressure dropped. He spent 18 days in the hospital. But a month later,
the hope is that he's cured with lymphoma.
Now John is back in the cigar shop, savoring each and every moment.
I feel good. I'm completely asymptomatic, and it's almost like it never happened.
Marty Salt, WGEM News.
Now